In this video, I'm going to be going over the fundamental building blocks of sound generation and manipulation in Maschine. So we are talking about instruments and effects and how we load them in the different areas of Maschine, what those different areas are, and how we edit those different things and how we manipulate them with either the hardware or the software. I'm not getting paid to make the video, but Native Instruments does send me the hardware for free, and I do have affiliate links. So that's a definite way you can help me out. I also have a tip jar that you can just give me a donation if you feel so inclined. Thanks for doing that if you do. So I'll make sure I gear this video towards the Maschine Mark III users, the Maschine Plus users, but it's also going to matter to the Maschine Micro users. So it's any Maschine user out there. I'll make sure I show it in the software and in the hardware. So the three different levels we can think of on Maschine are the sound level, the group level, and the master level. And at each one of those stages, we can put something called a plugin. And when we click this plugin button in a project, you are going to see a little plus button, and that plus button allows you to add instruments or effects. Sound is like the bottom level of Maschine, and everything goes up from there. And the only way to add an instrument in Maschine is at the sound level. We can also add effects at the sound level onto that instrument that we've got, or we can just have an effect at the sound level. And that's something called auxiliary sound effects, which is much more complicated. So I'll put a link to a video on that in the description where I go over auxiliary sound effects. So a sound can be any type of sound generating plugin, which we'll go over in a little bit. And you can have up to 16 different sounds in each group. And you can't have a sound independent from a group. So it's always going to go in a group. And that might be what is confusing about Maschine when you first open it up. It's like, I just want a track. Where are the tracks? And there are no traditional tracks like you'd have in a DAW. Instead, you've got groups. And so you have to have a group to have a sound. So here you can see I've got a bunch of different groups in a little project. And this one comes from the Crate Cuts video that I did a long time ago. I'll put a link to that one in the description. Really great expansion. And in this project, I've got one group that has a kit. And a kit is just a collection of up to 16 different sounds. And it's all within this one group. So we've got a kick, we've got a snare, we've got some percussion, we've even got a little kalimba loop. Next, we have a Dusty Keys group. And on this one, you can see that I've only got a sound loaded on the first slot. And on that one, I'm playing it more like a keyboard. With this first kit here, this first group, you can see that I'm just triggering samples. Something like that. So I played that kind of thing in. Every one of these sounds is just getting triggered every time I hit one of these 16 different pads. So if I go to the Dusty Keys group, and you can see our groups over here, we can see our first 8 groups. And if you have more than 8 groups, they are just going to be added in the next collection. So I can have a whole bunch of other groups, and to get to them, all you have to do is press Shift, and then you'll see that the groups turn into different looking buttons, and I can see A and B. So I can get to the first 8 right here, and I can get to the next 8 right here. So that's how we navigate around groups. With sounds themselves, we're going to see them within pad mode. So I can see all of my 16 different sounds loaded up inside one group right here on this first kit. So you really can think of groups like a traditional track. But the benefit of the setup here is that you can have a whole bunch of different sounds all within one group, and they all will come out of the same channel in the mixer. You can do all sorts of things to it at the same time. So it's kind of like a group track or a folder track in a traditional DAW, or it's just going to act as a container for one sound. And I do that a lot in my music production on Maschine because I like to keep things separate. So you can see I've got this kit right here. I've got the Dusty Keys. I've got a kalimba that I'm playing. I've got a bass thing all on another group. I've got a pad, a massive pad, which is just a virtual instrument. And then I've got a sliced up keys thing here with a whole bunch of different slices, all on different sounds, all within a group. So not only can a group contain a bunch of sounds that maybe that are all different samples, but you can also use a group to contain up to 16 different similar slices. So in this case, all I did is took a piano sample and I slice it up into different slices and put those slices onto group F. Once I do that, get out of sampling mode here. Once I do that, now I've got them all contained within this group. Even though they're all on different sound slots, they're all within one group. So then I can put effects on the entire group. Within a group, you could also do things like record the verse for an electric guitar and just plug your electric guitar in and play your electric guitar. And then on the next sound slot, you could play your chorus. And then on the next sound slot, you play your bridge or whatever it is. So now you have those different sound slots all have the different takes of the same electric guitar. So that, again, you can put effects on the entire group and you're affecting all of the electric guitar takes throughout your song. Inside a group, I can have a whole bunch of different sounds. And not only can I trigger them with the pads, but it goes a step further. Every sound has the ability to be sequenced, and every group has the ability to be sequenced. So we'll get into editing notes on both of those in a little bit. So you really can think of a sound having its own channel. You can think of a group having its own channel with all of the sounds within it being funneled through that channel. And then all of those groups then go through the master. With those different levels, we can put effects on each channel. So I can go to this snare shot right here, which is a sound, and I'm up at the sound level here on the plugin instance. And in the software, you would make sure you click this plugin button if you were seeing something different in this middle control zone. But if I click the plugin button right here, I can see I'm on the sound, here I'm on the group. And if I'm at the sound level on the software or the hardware, here I can put effects, individual effects on each individual sound. And I can have as many as I want, and they're gonna run from left to right. So the sampler to the metaverb, onto a delay or whatever I want. And then I can do the same thing right here. I can click and add more effects as the signal flows from top to bottom up here in the software. But as I said, all of these different sounds are being funneled through this group channel. So if I click on the group in the software, or if I click on the group on the hardware, you're going to see all the effects that are on that kit or that collection of sounds. So this is a really great way for you to put a global effect like a reverb on the entire drum kit all at once without having to put a reverb on each individual sound. But having that ability to put individual effects on any one of those sounds is what makes Maschine so powerful. It's just very easy for me to go to this hi-hat right here, click on the sound level, and put some kind of crazy effect just on that one sound, and then go to the group level and put some effect on the whole group. And when you load up a lot of expansion kits, by the way, they could come with a bunch of effects built in. So that's just something to be aware of. Here you can see we have a ton of effects on this kit. It's kind of ridiculous. At the master level, now all of the groups in your project are being funneled through the master. So this channel right here has no effects on it to start with. And at the master level, you could do things like mastering effects, compression, EQ, limiting, a maximizer, any one of these effects where you want to change the entire mix of your song. But it is possible to put mastering effects on your entire output. You just have to be really careful about the gain level being fed into things like limiters. But that's the subject for another video. So now what we should do is talk about the different types of sound generators and the different types of effects that you can load at the sound level, and then the effects that you can load at the group and the master level. In order to do this, let's go to a fresh one right here, and we can see up in the software that I'm on the plugin button and I'm at the sound level. And up in the software, I can see that we have a bunch of options. We have both instruments and effects at the top level because I haven't made anything yet. The first choices here are the internal ones that come with Maschine. Whenever you see internal on instruments or effects, that just means the stuff that comes native to the Maschine software or hardware if you're on Maschine Plus. And then beyond that, we can go to things like the native instruments, virtual instruments that come with things like Complete. We've got Massive and Absinthe and stuff like that. And then you've got your whole list of VST instruments that you have installed on your computer. So also audio units on a Mac. And if you look at the internal options for sound generation or instruments plugins on Maschine, we can see we've got the audio plugin, the sampler plugin, a drum synth where you are just generating through the Maschine synthesizer the sound of a kick, so it's not a sample or anything like that, and the sound of hi-hat and so on. We've got a bass synth, and then we've got this new polysynth that just came out, which is just a really basic analog synth style synthesizer. And then we have the virtual instruments, as I mentioned earlier. So a few things should be noted about audio and sampler, because these two are very different from the virtual instruments that we have here, or the synthesizers that we have, and they are Machine's way of dealing with audio or samples. And so this audio module came out a few years ago, and originally all we had was the sampler. And with the sampler, that is really, to me, the most fundamental, the most elemental element of Maschine. And the thing with that is that's where you're going to load in any chunks of audio, manipulate them, and do all of this magic that we do with Maschine sampling. The audio module is a slightly different version of the sampler that allows you to load a piece of audio and have it just play back in your project every time you press play. So the audio module gives you control over things like the pitch of your audio without changing the tempo, or changing the tempo of your audio without changing the pitch. I would often use the audio module if I was doing something like recording guitar, or recording vocals, or recording bass. And the sampler plugin is probably going to be the most used thing in Maschine. It is for me. And that is just the ability to load a sample and then trigger it with a pad. So I could load a sound in like this guitar sound right here, and the sampler is just going to let me trigger it. I could load a totally different sample on sound slot 2 and trigger that one. But the other thing you can do is access something called keyboard mode. So if I go to my actual keyboard, I can just start playing the sample as it's been stretched out on the keyboard. I can also go over to Maschine and hit something called keyboard mode and play it from the pads just like it was on a keyboard as well. So we'll talk about editing and what you do with this kind of stuff in a moment. So before we do that though, I think we should just quickly talk about the browser. So in the browser, the first thing you're going to see is projects, and that's a way for you to load entire projects that come with expansions or come with Maschine. And if you're new to Maschine, you'll only have Maschine in all of these different levels here, unless you have purchased some expansions. But this is what you're going to see if you open up Maschine for the first time, and you're going to have a bunch of projects you can load up. It'll have a whole bunch of patterns, and you can play back the song. Next thing we've got is groups. We're going to see a whole bunch of kits. Let's just go with this apparat kit. I'm going to click load. So if I click the pad mode button, we are going to see the different samples that we have loaded on here. And I can click each one of those to select them. And then if I want to see what each one of these sounds are, I can just click on this plugin button. And then now I'll see at the sound level what each one is. And these are all samplers as we see it here. Some of them have effects built into them. We'll see how we can do that in a second. So that's looking for groups in the browser. Next on the browser, we have sounds. So whichever sound slot you have selected at that time, you can see I've got pad 8, or in the software, we can see 8 is focused right here. It's going to load that sound onto that sound slot, and it'll erase what you have on there already. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff that you don't accidentally delete something. But at the sound level, we can load up sound patches. And then we can also load up these following things: instruments, effects, loops, and one-shots. Those can all be loaded onto a sound. And by the way, this is what the browser categories look like in the software. So you can see we've got projects, we've got groups, we've got sounds, and then beyond that we've got instruments, effects, loops, and one-shots. So let's load up this clavinet just to show you what loading a sound is like. So here you can hear all the sounds of my drum kit that I had before that I just loaded. And now on this one sound slot, we have loaded up an individual sound. If I click the plugin button and make sure I'm on sound, we can see the sampler with reverb on it has been loaded. And then when we go to things like expansions and we're at the sound level, we are now seeing all of the sounds that they have made for that expansion that might come with effects as well. Next thing in the browser, we've got instruments, and this is where you're going to see a whole bunch of the virtual instruments that you have installed on your computer. So I can see the native instrument stuff here, and then I can see all of the other brands. One thing to note is that through the browser, you will only see under the Instruments tab, you will only see those virtual instruments that are formatted for the Maschine or the Complete Control system. If you're looking for a virtual instrument like Omnisphere, you won't find it in here. So instead, we're going to have to use the plugin browser. So I go Shift Browser make sure you press the Shift button, and this looks a whole lot different from the normal browser. And here we can see type of instrument or effect, and then here we could go to Spectrasonics and load up Omnisphere right there. So we can see those 3 different virtual instruments. So back to the regular browser, we've got instruments. Next thing we've got is effects. That's going to be any kind of effect that comes compatible with the system. So we can actually even press Shift and look at the vendors that we've got in here. And we can see that we've got Native Instruments and Arturia. Those are the only ones that I've got installed that will show up that are Complete Control compatible. And then we've got loops and one-shots. And these used to be one category just called samples, but now we've got them organized as loops and one-shots, which is kind of nice. Anything that's been tagged as a loop will show up in here. And then the next thing we can see is one-shots. We've got stuff like drums, and then I can go, all right, let's go for a hi-hat closed. And then now I'm only going to see the closed hi-hat samples or one-shots in this Astral Flutter expansion. So what I'm going to do here is load up a little polysynth on the sound slot 1, just so I can show you how to start layering in effects. In the software, if I can't see this, if I'm in some different view, just hit the plugin button, make sure you're on the sound level, and then I can use the 4D encoder to move over to that plus button. And that plus button on the hardware and on the software is where you're going to add new effects. So I can see right up here, I can go to internal effects, which are all the ones that come native to Maschine. So I can go to reverb, load that one up. I can change the mix. I can change the reverb time. And now that is loaded up on this one sound slot. I can add more effects. I can keep adding them. And then I can go over to this group right here, which has a whole bunch of individual sound slots loaded. And here I have to be very careful that I click on the group button because I want to put some effects on the entire group. So in order to do that, click on the group. Now the plus button is only going to allow me to put effects because that's all I can put at the group level. So I go to internal and I'll go to, say, the phaser. So I put the phaser on there and crank it up. Now everything in that group is getting phaser put on it. That's the beauty of having an entire drum kit on a group and then immediately being able to process the entire group all at once. So I'm gonna get rid of that. To get rid of any effects you don't want, just click with the 4D encoder and go up to none and click load. And if you press Shift, you can see that I've got bypass and remove. So I can just go Shift, remove, and it's gone. So that's another way to get rid of it. And then of course, you can just right click in the software and just click none. So the last thing we need to talk about is how do you edit things in Maschine with these 2 different worlds, with this group world or drum kits and with this sound level or this sound kind of world. When you are working with a kit, say a drum kit, let's go to this Apparat kit. Every time you are playing in pad mode and working with something like a kit, you are just triggering that sound. Even something like this little synthesizer right here, I have no way to access the individual notes of this from pad mode when I'm triggering. So maybe that's what you want. And in a lot of situations, you might have some kind of pitch sample that just works perfectly. You don't need to change the pitch of it or have it change throughout your little song. But there is a way for you to access the notes of every single sound. And that becomes really important when we're doing something like a synthesizer. Any one of these groups here where I only have one sound loaded, I'm treating that like a track. And you can see in pad mode here, pad mode on the software, I can see my dusty keys and I've got some information loaded here and it looks like it's all overlapping on top of each other when I am in this pad view on the software or the event editor. So this is very confusing. How do I access the notes that I played on this little patch? Right? So those are actual notes that I played. And in order to access those, we have to go to keyboard view on the hardware, or we look at it through keyboard view up here on the software. So these 2 buttons right here are really important for you to understand. This button here is how you look at all the information for an entire kit that you are triggering in pad mode. This button here is how you would sequence individual notes on one individual sound. So I click on this keyboard view right here, and now I can see the notes that I played. So there it is. So when I'm working with something like the dusty keys or the kalimba or the bass, each one of these groups is when I click on it, it's going to show me the information in keyboard view. And that just makes the most sense. That's how I want to view the notes that I've just programmed in. But when I am working on the drum kit where I'm triggering individual sounds as a kit, then I want to see them in the pad view. Now we're in pad mode, we can see all of the different sounds that we have loaded. And if I want to treat this like an instrument within this kit, I can actually do that. I can go and play this as notes by clicking on that sound and then clicking the keyboard mode. If I click keyboard mode, now I have the ability to sequence in actual notes on that one sound. So this is, again, very confusing when you're first getting into Maschine. It's like, wait, so I can have like 16 synthesizers all within one group and have each one of them have their own sequenced MIDI information? Yeah, you can. And for me, I prefer to keep my project organized by groups so that the kits are loaded up on an entire group, but all of the synthesizer things are on their own separate group for mixing and effects and stuff like that. So what can I do with this now? Inside this group, I can record something. So now you can see the notes that I just played, all within this drum kit. Because I am on keyboard view over here, I can see the actual notes that I played. If I click back to pad view for a moment, now I'm going to see the atomic bass is just showing me that I've got information on that sound, but in order to access that information, I need to click keyboard view. What that allows me to do as well here, go back to pad mode and just play something along. So now watch what happens. So now I can see in the pad view, I can see my kick, snare, and hi-hat pattern that I just played in. And I can also tell that I've got some atomic bass notes of some sort right there. If I want to edit these atomic bass notes within a kit, all I need to do is select that sound and click over to keyboard view. Now I can see my notes. Another way to do that from the hardware is, say you're in pad mode or you're not in pad mode, you're just in the plugin instance. And I want to see the notes that I played in on that atomic bass. All I have to do is click on that pad, select that pad, and click over to keyboard mode. Now I can play those notes or add more notes to it. So just be aware of these different ways to shift your view between a group and a sound. And on the hardware, you're going to see that by pad mode and keyboard mode. And then we can go into chords and step mode as well. Those are related to the keyboard mode. But for now, if you just understand pad mode and keyboard mode, you're going to understand what's happening. And up here on the software, you just have to remember that there's pad view and keyboard view. And don't worry about this. This is for editing audio and samples and stuff like that. We'll worry about that later. But this is a really strange way to work with samples when you're first getting into it. But it's a beautiful way once you get your brain around it, because it's so easy now to go in and very quickly sequence something. You could even add like a snare thing. You could make that snare change in pitch by selecting that sound, clicking over to keyboard mode and going. You could record that in there if you wanted to. So watch this. So now we can see those notes moving up on the snare. And we can see the hits that I had already put in showed up on the C. So that's kind of the default spot for them to hit if you are not in keyboard view. And in order to access those notes again, I need to make sure I'm clicked on the snare, click over to keyboard view, and now I can see those notes that I put in for the snare drum. And then the beauty of all this is it's really easy to mix these things. So if I click on the mixer button or go up to the mixer here in the software, I can see under this group we have a whole mixer that shows up just for this one kit. Maybe I'll undo that snare thing. That's kind of obnoxious. If I go to the mixer here on the software, for this group, I can see the kick, the snare, the closed hi-hat, the open hi-hat. And here I can cycle through these 2 pages to see 1 to 8 and 9 to 16. I press play. Let's just solo this kit for a second. And you can hear my atomic bass too. And I can go in here, I can very quickly adjust the level of each one of these sounds. I can click the 4D encoder and adjust the panning. And up in the software, of course, you can just use your mouse. And then, because all of these sounds are being funneled through that group, we can now look at the group level in the mixer as well. And so in the hardware, you just click up with the 4D encoder, and now you can see all of the different groups and have access to their panning and their level. So I really hope that was clear for you. This is a hard video to make. Believe it or not, it's the second time I've made and edited this video, but it's really important for you to understand the sound level, the group level, the master level. The sound level is where you add instruments and or effects. The group level is where you can put effects on either a sound in a group or a whole bunch of sounds in a group. And then the master level is where you can put effects or plugins on the entire mix. Very important stuff. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos like this in the future, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.